Well, Kathryn, I'm pumped to have you on before I've even had John on. I think I invited him on and he never got back with me, but you said yes. So you're here. You win because I knew I wanted both of you guys because I've read y'all's books, but you were the one that said, yeah, let's do this first. So too bad for John. Happy clap for you. I'm glad to have you on the show.
Aw, thank you. And you know John loves you, so he'll definitely do it. It's just a matter of like fitting into the schedule, but it'll happen.
Oh, I know. I know. Well, I wanted to have you on because y'all's book, Relationship Grit, Shay and I read through it. Got a copy of it right here. You should pick it up. It's a Wall Street Journal bestseller, and it's great for a lot of reasons. I love how you and John co-wrote it together, and the chapters kind of flow from him writing a chapter, you writing a chapter, and I feel like I get the whole story, not just his side of the story, but your side of the story. And it's not just a advice book. It's like, here's the real deal kind of book. So highly recommend everybody pick up a copy of it. A true story with lessons to stay together, grow together, and thrive together. But one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, selfishly, was I see you and John as unique, and you're, for lack of a better term, you're like a power couple, right? You're both powerful communicators. You're both entrepreneurs. You're both podcasters. You're both authors. Like, that's very rare to see two people in the couple, both people in the couple, showing up in the world in a powerful way, and that can. I don't see a lot of good examples of that. I mean, usually it's one or the other that dominates that personality or is more public. And then if they both are, it creates a lot of, potential issues if you have two strong personalities. And so I'm really curious for the people who are watching and listening, maybe what's your take on y'all's power couple-ish relationship? What would you say is a key for success that you guys have stayed together so long? And I will get into what, the acronym for grit and some of the stuff in the book, but just off the top, like, you're both ambitious in your work. You both have done a lot and accomplished a lot. How has it worked for you guys?
That's such a great question. And actually, we do talk about this in the book. I don't know, and to what degree, but when John and I met, we were both really just movers and shakers in Atlanta, very, very big into the social scene. I was modeling and acting at the time. I was doing a lot of charity work. John owned a bar in Atlanta and had a nonprofit called the Phoenix Organization it raised money for children's charities. So he would do all these events. And so when we first met, and we met at an event, right? Well, the first time we met, I was walking past his bar, but when we met for the second time and he got my number, we were at a social event. And so when we started dating, Graham, it was interesting because it got to the point where we would both have events and we would have to discuss or sometimes fight over whose event was the most important or which one we should go to. And it was a real power struggle. Now, listen, I am a very strong personality. And if anybody had ever told me that I would take a back seat to anybody, I would laugh because it was the one thing I always said I wouldn't do after watching my mother. But in this particular situation, as John and I started moving forward and, we were engaged and I knew we were going to get married, I really had to sit back and not think about my ego and not think about, it being a power struggle, but, how did we want to move forward in this relationship? And I had decided that I was going to not take a back seat. I don't mean it like that, but really get behind him and support him.
Yep.
And so that's what I did. Now, it's not like I just went away and it's not like I just, but
sat on the couch.
It worked out for me too, because a lot of the things I was doing, I was a moneymaker. And for me to also take a back seat meant I wasn't making that money. But a beautiful thing was, John, I was acting and modeling, but I could never really do that full time because I wasn't good enough in terms of the acting to be, honestly, or had passion that I was going to move out to LA.
Right.
And so it was something I was doing in Atlanta. Well, there wasn't enough work for me to be able to provide for myself. So here I was in a different situation where I had John's support. And so while I got behind him and supported his work and his nonprofit and his mission, I also got to do a lot of the things I wanted to do, which was some plays I wanted to do and things that weren't really, that I didn't have to make sure I was paying my rent. So it was a win-win for both of us. And then through the journey and process of us getting married and having children, I did continue to not work out of the home. And I'm going to tell you a couple things about this. And I just had this conversation with a young couple who are navigating some things. And the one thing, and believe me, if you read our book, you'll know John did a lot of things wrong.
Oh yeah, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about John. He's very honest. I had a thought for you guys.
Yep, and we want to talk about that. But one of the things that he did that I feel was so crucial to making this work is he never, ever, ever made me feel bad about not bringing an income into the home. He never brought it up. It was never his money. Mm-hmm. And what that did was it formed a bond of trust.
Yeah.
Right? So that I was in a position to really support him knowing that we were in this together. And and he'll tell you, that's a lot of his success. I was behind him 100%, holding him up because we were a team.
Yeah.
And so that I find and I see in younger couples, and I understand why. It's scary and, you have to earn that trust, but that was something that he did. So to get back to your question, all through the time that we were raising the children, my goal, and I would say this, my goal was to raise champions. And so I was doing that at home, supporting John and the work he was doing. But as soon as my kids were out of the house, I went back to what I call my second act. Decided to start a podcast, started speaking, and I'm kind of doing it. And he supports me in that. I got to tell you the truth. There are times now where it's like, okay, so we share a social media person and I actually found her and she was working for me first.
That's
and
awesome.
All of a sudden she's working for John and she is so busy that she's dropping the ball on my stuff.
You're like, come on. You're like, what are you doing here?
And so it kind of goes back to the same thing, and so, again, it's communication. Now, I go to John and I say, listen, our social media girl's dropping the ball. Now he could say to me, too bad. You know what? How much are you bringing in versus how, but he doesn't. He's like, you know what? We're a team. This is all together. We'll address this together. And so it's just constantly been a knowing that you are for each other, not against each other. That's worked for us. And I always say this too. Look, I know many, many couples that they both work out of the home. They both have successful careers, but it takes communication and connection. Well, really, it takes the 4 C's: communication, connection, the commitment, and to show you care. And it also takes the grit, which, I don't need to throw it, but it's the truth.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's that
we're gonna get into it.
framework.
Yeah.
When you have that foundation and you can nurture the foundation, then the fruit is beautiful, right? So, yeah.
Oh, I love that. And I want to get into the framework here in a second because it's really practical, but I just wanted to highlight something you said so people get it, because you brought up money specifically, which you might know better than me, but I think I just heard a stat that it's the number one cause for fights, which lead to divorce in a marriage. And money's hard because money affects our life, whether you're married or not, right? Lack of it can be a big problem. But Shay and I never have fought about money. And I'm realizing that's very rare. And we've always been in agreement that it's our money. We immediately got one bank account because if you don't, it just shows that you don't trust each other. Yes. And that might be harsh for some people, but I was like, because you've said it multiple times and you say it in the book, and I see it in you and John's relationship because I know you both personally, is you are a team. Mm-hmm. How can a team operate? This is John's other book too, The One Truth, like oneness versus separateness. How can you really be one team as a couple if you have separate bank accounts, if you're using language like your money and my money, or you pay those bills and I pay these bills? That's like a roommate that's kind of sharing the load. That's not the same thing as a marriage. And I wanted to highlight that, because I think even though you think money is this compartmentalized thing and then our marriage is over here, I don't think it's like that. I think when two become one, right, as the way the Bible describes marriage, money is symbolic of how united are you, or lack of uniting. So I think that was really important that you brought that up.
It's a big one. So money is number one, and sex is number two. But we can go into intimacy. I'm writing a book on intimacy. That's a whole other side. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, no, it's so important, and that's awesome that you guys did that. And I've had couples say to me, well, what if one of us is not good with money? And that happens. And so listen, that's something you need to put your energy towards, put your focus towards that. How can you come up with an agreement? And there's nothing wrong with seeking outside help, maybe, getting someone else to set a system up, because, we're all coming from different places. Some person, one side of the couple may come from a lot of money. Another may come from severe lack. Right. So we all come into a relationship.
You bring up a good point, and we won't get into it today, but you got to know your money story. Like what story did your family tell about money subconsciously versus my family? Like, oh, wow, lack and abundance. And to your point, just on the practical level, I don't mean both of you have to like pay the bills physically or be money related or numbers related. Like, we each have different roles. Like Shay will tell you, taking out the trash is not her ministry. That's her language. She's like, that's not my ministry, but it's our trash, but I'm the one that takes it out because she doesn't like to do the yucky stuff. But yeah, I think there's just something there about the unity, and that's beautiful to see how you and John have done it. I want to get into the book, but real quick, why did you guys write the book? Like, was this something like, we know one day we're going to write a book?
No.
Or was it like, was it an impetus for like, oh my gosh, we have to write this thing? Where did that come from?
Never had I thought that I was going to write a book or write it with John. I really feel like it's a God thing. As I, again, started to move into it's funny how I feel like God orchestrates all this. As I started to move into this new life of not having kids at home, I'm running to sports teams, sports practices. I don't know why, but I kept getting women, in particularly, there were a couple men that I would run into at Target, at Publix, and they would just pour their heart out to me. And it was always a struggle with their marriage. Rather, one of them was cheating, or one of them was leaving, or one of them had checked out. I mean, and I don't know why, but this just kept happening. And I would stand, like, literally, I say, like, in Publix next to the carrot, the vegetable aisle, and start asking questions. And as I started asking questions, although the answers were always different, the core answer was the same. And it always boiled down to basic things like, oh, well, did you tell him how did you tell him that No. Did you share that with him? No. It really blew me away, Graham, how many of these couples that had been married 25, I'm not talking about 5 years, I'm talking 25, 30 years, that were not communicating.
Wow.
And so I would go home, I would give them my story, and they were always, and then they'd send a text or message me on Facebook, like, you don't know how much your story, helped me and gave me hope. And I did what you said, and this happened. And so this started to happen. And finally, one day I went home and I said to John, I don't know. I really feel like, oh, I know what happened. You just reminded me. I just wrote a story on Facebook. I literally wrote a story talking about some of John and I's struggles and, how we worked through it, and it went viral.
Wow.
And then it was after that I said, I think this is a real important topic we need to talk about. And so, because it can be taboo, I feel like people who've been married a long time almost have a level of shame. Like, surely we should have it figured out by now.
Yeah. That's it.
And I'm going to say this. I don't know what percentage of your readers are Christian or spiritual, but I have also found couples that are Christians or that are practicing, Christianity. I'll say that in particular, because that's what I seem to encounter. Sometimes that can actually, I'm trying to think of the right word, not mask, but there's so much in the scripture that they're not really talking about the real issues. They're not really uncovering it. And there's almost another level of shame that, well, surely if I'm a Christian and I'm, so well read in the Bible but they're still not looking at the issues.
Yeah.
They're kind of living, living under that veil, not able to really say what's going on. I found that really interesting as well.
That's fascinating.
So, yeah. And so that's when John and I decided we needed to write the book. Why? Because of everything we've went through, if we can make it, if we can stay together and have the kind of relationship that we do now, anybody can.
I love that. I mean, that's one of the things everyone should read this book, Relationship Grit. The story is very relatable because it's very raw and it's very messy. It's a good story. I mean, if you follow the emotional arc, there's a beautiful start, and then there's this kind of plunge of like, what is happening? Is this going to make it? Are we going to make it? And it wasn't, just one person. There was just like the issues in this, seeing you guys come up from it. And then obviously I've only known you in this season of being on the other side of it. Not that it's it's an ongoing thing, but it's a relatable story. So it's not just like, hey, here's some advice, because no one wants to listen to advice from someone that seems to have it all together. So I appreciate the rawness. Everybody should read this story, but we don't have time to get into the whole story. I want to save that for the book. I want people to just see some of these very raw moments, but I would love you to unpack the grit, the GRIT. It's an acronym because it really it's something that when I heard you guys talk about it, I think in the Wellspring, then I read the book, and Shay and I went through it, and it just 100%, I'm like, yes. Like it makes it simple. If you have these 4 things, which you unpack more in depth in the book, you have a really good chance for the marriage staying together or your relationship staying together. So can you walk through what is the G, the R, the I, the T in Relationship Grit?
Yeah, I will. And I just want to preface this by saying this framework, the grit framework, the GRIT, is not just for your intimate relationship. I mean, these principles work with your friendships, right? They can work with people, in the marketplace. And so I've found it's universal.
Yeah.
And so the G stands for God. You got to bring God into your relationship. And I'm going to give you my confession. I used to make excuses when I would say this on stage sometimes. If it was just a group of people, I didn't know where anyone, was in their faith journey, because I was so worried about turning people off to the rest of the framework, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I got to tell you how funny this is. So we were there's a guy, Jay Glazer, he's an NFL announcer, and we were at his house in Malibu. And there was a whole mix of people. There were some pro football players and Brett Michaels was there, the lead singer of Poison, playing the guitar.
Naturally.
Yeah. And we were sitting around the table, and just a group of people I'd never met before. And somebody said, oh, Kathryn and John wrote a book. And someone says, what's the book about? So I start talking about the book, and they want to know the grit framework. And I brought up the G.
Yeah.
And I really kind of backtracked a little, and I do say this in my talk because I don't want to turn people off, but I realize I need to be stronger. And I say, people are all over the place spiritually. John grew up Jewish. I grew up Catholic, but never went to church. or mass. When we met, we were both new age, but it was through a series of encounters that we became followers of Jesus. And that's where we are now. But I know this can be a touchy subject, so I preface all that, but I'm telling you, every single time I give this grit framework, and every time I am worried about how the G is going to be received because I don't know the audience, it never fails that at least 2 people, if not more, come up to me and say, the part I really love the most, that you brought God into it. And so that happened to me. Here I am at this like NFL, rockers and, all these people, some of them are a big party, everybody's got their, and that was the main thing that several people came up to me at different points through the night at the party, that they just loved the G. So I just want to share that. So you have to bring God into your relationship. And we talk about it in the book a little bit, but basically John and I went through a really rough patch and I was going to leave him. This was the second time. And he really, really fought for the marriage. And so in that, he came up with a prayer. And that prayer he started saying every single night. And I'll share the prayer with you.
Hey, friend, we'll get back to the episode in just a moment. Real quick, I hope you're enjoying the episode. And if so, please share it with somebody that needs to hear this episode today. It would mean so much to me. Also, I want to give you a gift for hanging out with me today. I want to give you my free $1 million life-giving business formula on-demand training. Inside of this less than 60-minute training, it will help you uncover your uniqueness to build a 7-figure boutique brand without burning out. This is some of my favorite material. These are the things that I'm taking my private clients through, but I want to share them with you in this free training. So if you've already built your business, but it's not giving you life, it's taking life from you, this is the training for you. It's absolutely free. Just go to grahamcochran.com/lifegiving. That's grahamcochran.com/lifegiving, all one word. And you can register for your spot right there. Now back to the episode.
God, we invite you into our marriage and family to love us, to heal us, to unite us, to strengthen us, so we can grow strong together and serve you together and raise children that glorify and honor you. And we added on that last part once it became our family prayer. We added on and raise children that glorify and honor you. And so John would say this prayer every night, and I was not interested in hearing the prayer. And then I started memorizing it in my head. Like I knew what he was saying, but I wasn't going to say it with him. And then one night I reached over and I grabbed his hand and I started to say the prayer with him. And that was the night that I decided to forgive him. Wow. And so that prayer has become so integral in our life. We say it to this day. We say it every single night. If we're not together, we'll get on the phone and say it. If we can't connect with each other, John will text me or I'll text him and say, I just said the prayer every night. Yeah. Wow. And so that's the G, because there's a study, and sometimes I turn this around, so I want to make sure I'm saying it right. 99% of couples who pray together stay together. It's a Gallup poll study that came out. Now, 50% of couples that attend church stayed together. It was still more, than, not going to church, but 99% of couples who pray together. So that's like ongoing, right? So that kind of brings you into resolve. When you're resolving, it's ongoing. You're resolving to stay in your relationship. You're resolving to stay together. John resolved also to fight for us to stay together. And so, you have to fight for your relationship. You have to work on it, right? You have to stay in it. So many times, we think, the grass is greener on the other side, or, that looks more enticing. No, I'll tell you, with John and I, and we've been together almost 29 years, married almost 27. And, our love our sex, I'm just going to say it, our everything about our relationship is so much better than it was. And it's because we stayed together, right? I mean, we had ups and downs. There were times I did not like him. I was like, it would make him mad. He would make me mad, but staying together, there's this really beautiful thing that happens. So resolve to stay in your relationship. And then the next letter is I, which stands for invest. You have to invest in the relationship. And, it's kind of like saying like, okay, I want to be fit. All right, great. Well, it doesn't mean you're just fit. What do? You have to work for it, right? Yep. You have to go to the gym. You have to invest in preparing the right foods. You have to, so there are things that you have to do to be healthy and fit. Same thing with your relationship. And we talked about this before we hit record, but it's the small sacrifices sometimes that make the biggest difference. It doesn't have to be this huge thing. It's little things. And as I told you, I found it kind of fascinating that a lot of the people that resonated the most with the I were older couples or couples that have been together a long time, because they said that familiarity, it can really creep in, and you're just used to that person being there. And so you kind of stop putting in effort. You stop investing in the relationship. So just make sure you're still doing that. So it's small sacrifices, can lead to big results, right? Yeah. And so that's the I. And then the T is together. You have to do it together. And I know that sounds like, well, yeah, you're together. But, so many times it might be one of you giving more than the other. Now, that's okay. I wouldn't judge that. But you both have to want it. You both have to be engaged in the relationship. But there's always going to be times that, Graham, I'm telling you, when you start promoting this book and you're out there trying to get on every single podcast, it's going to be, you're going to need some support behind you. That's going to be the time that Shay's going to need to invest more in you. Right. And I'm sure there are times when she's launching something or doing something with her company. And so it's an ebb and flow. Yeah. But you always have to remember you're on the same team. And I like to say, sometimes we could say the T stands for team also. Right. Because if you're not on the same team and you're both keeping score, you both lose. Nobody wins.
Nobody wins. Yeah.
So that's the GRIT framework. That's the basic part of that. And certainly in the book, we give more on that. And as you've read the book, you'll see I give tips, 11 tips, and John does. And my gosh, matter of fact, I just realized I need to do something with this, but I have a free action plan as well. If you go to my website, kathrynforreal.com, and if you have to purchase the book for that one, there's a free action plan, but you have to purchase the book, put in your code for, if it's Amazon or whatever. And honestly, it is a course. I really need to turn it into a course. But I also have some freebies that you don't have to buy anything if you go to my website, kathrynforreal.com. We talked about this before, and it's the 5 ways to fight less. So that's a good download to get as well. There's several on the website.
I love it. There's so much there. Real quick, I love the framework. So GRIT, God, resolve, invest, and together. I love that you start with God. And it's a very interesting time. And you and John have a cool perspective on this, because you kind of came from New Age. And I think New Age and spirituality, or whatever you want to call it, is really at a high point right now. People are very interested in help outside of the physical. They're very much aware there is a spiritual realm. They may not be looking in the right place, but they want help. And so I think for marriage is like the hardest thing on planet Earth. It's like marriage and like managing a team in a company. Like, people are just hard. Relationships are hard. I think everything else is a lot easier. Making money is easier. Building something is easier, but like people and family and parenting and relationships is hard. So to do it in the physical, you'd have to be like flawless every day, and that's not going to happen. But when you bring spiritual power into it, I love that. You're like giving yourself a power tool. So I love that you brought up God. I love that even the second one, resolve, So none of these have to do with you taking action yet. It's like bringing God into it. Let's get some help. So we're not relying on ourselves. Number 2, resolve. That's just a decision. That's a mindset. That's like
Yes.
you haven't even done anything yet. You're like,
It is
we're
such a yes.
right. We're closing the back door. That's a decision.
Love that you say that. It is absolutely a decision you make. Love that. Yep.
Well, and you think about like, I think Shay and I joke about, because we got 2 daughters, right? 14 and 11. And, one of them, there's a boy that she kind of likes at church. So we're talking about, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to deal with this one day and marry them off. And I pray for their future husbands, but we're like, can't we just do an arranged marriage? Because arranged marriages actually work out better than non-arranged marriages. And the reason why, I'm kind of half joking, half serious, but one of the reasons why they work is because there's no option. They're like, we're in it for life. And so they've made a decision. They've resolved, okay, I don't even really know you, so let's figure this out. So it's kind of a strange for Western American culture, not strange for a lot of other Eastern cultures, but the resolve is there. And usually there's a spiritual component as well. So very cool that the first 2 parts of the framework have to do with mindset and bringing spiritual power into it. And then investing in the marriage 100%. That makes so much sense. And then the together and the team, which is probably the hardest. I spoke to a woman at this conference I was at. Actually, Pete Vargas was putting on the conference, the 10X Stages conference in Miami. And I spoke to this woman named Wendy who they had a rough marriage when she was younger. They both started to go to church. They were like party animals. They started to go to church. They needed help. They were about to end it. She actually became a believer and follower of Jesus first. And it took her husband 7 years till he finally accepted Jesus. And she said, can you imagine 7 years of you're trying to do it together, but really only one person's playing the game.
Wow.
The other person, not that they're not fighting for the marriage, but they don't agree on the spiritual component, which is so hard. And I feel like that's the part of the grit that you really do need the other person to want to be together too and to fight for it as well. And I know that in your story, there was moments where maybe you fought harder and then moments where John fought harder. What would you say to someone who's in a relationship right now, marriage or not, where they're close, but to following these principles, but only one's really fighting for the togetherness in this moment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I get that question a lot, actually. And I would say, I think every situation really is different. There's, is this person not also in the relationship because there's alcohol abuse or, it really depends on the situation. And I do think it goes back to God, to be honest, because I think that's where prayer comes in. And I don't think anybody should ever put themselves into a situation where they're being abused or, that's when I say, resolve and have that, grit. I don't mean, take abuse. So it really depends. Like I'd have to hear the situation to really be able to address each one. But I can tell you some non-negotiables would be, I'm not saying you have to bear grit and, bear abuse in any way, physically, mentally, or emotionally. But, sometimes one of you goes through, and it may happen at different times that both of you do, but, there's midlife crises. There's, earlier than me, people go through like, oh my gosh, I just turned 30. Is this what the next 30 years? I mean, it happens. I went through it. I hit 40. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to tell you, let me tell you what happened to me when I hit 40. And all of a sudden, all these things were happening. I ran into my old therapist that I was using back when I was raising the kids. Jade was being bullied and, it was a whole thing. So I had used this woman from our church. So she was retired. But anyway, I see her at the gym and I'm like, oh my gosh, Deb. And I start like pouring my heart out and she literally stopped and looked at me and she goes, yep, because you will never be as pretty as you are right now. This is the best you're going to be today. Like basically, you're just headed downhill. She didn't help me at all. It threw me. Oh my gosh. I can't even begin to tell you. But so we're all going to like struggle with different things in our lives. And, it's about having the emotional maturity to say, I really love this person and I'm going to fight for them. 7 years, God bless her. But you know what's so beautiful about that? 7 years, God blessed her.
Yep.
She was literally getting that right from the Holy Spirit and building her own foundation in Christ. Yep. So that's kind of a cool thing.
To the story, she did say she prayed him in. She's like, I really believe it was because I prayed faithfully for 7 years.
Yes.
But most people aren't patient. Most people are most people, I'm going to say Graham is selfish and not patient. And it's like, I will do the right thing and I will fight for it. But there is a limit where you feel like, I've been doing this for 6 months, or I've been a good husband for the last 2 years. And when I realized that, wow, this is going to be for a lifetime, 2 years of serving my family and then not getting what I want and then being bitter. A, was that really service? B, what is 2 years? You're committed to this woman for life. And when there's kids involved, you're committed to those kids, outside of abuse or something like that, where like we're committed to us staying together for the kids. And there's just so much, like our culture is just not into commitment, and it's not into, if I'm not getting what I want, I'm going to stay in there anyway. Like we don't operate that way. So it is hard. And that's why when I see marriages like yours, and Shay and I want to stay together, obviously to the end, and like leave a legacy of what a marriage can be. Not perfect, but we grew the whole way to the end and learned to serve each other well. It's so rare and it's so cool. And that's one reason why I wanted to bring you on. I want to make time for a couple last things. There's so much we could talk about. Everyone should pick up the book.
I just want to say this real quick for anybody listening. It is so normal for, if you are staying together, you're both going to go through different things, different issues, where maybe somebody wants to take off. But the beauty is because you're really kind of growing up together, right? Like in the relationship, you're really just growing up, and so, but man, the reward, is, I'm not just saying that, I'm telling you, we look back now and think, wow, because listen, we both had times we were checking out, right? And so you're right. It's about looking at it from the long haul, but it's normal. I say, don't beat yourself up, I guess is what I'm going to say. If you get feelings like that, or there are times like that, and that's where I feel like the 4 C's do come in, which I talk about in the book, which is the communication and the commitment. So I just need to say that because, I don't want anyone feeling guilty if when these thoughts come up, you're human.
Welcome to the club. Yeah.
It's natural. I've had them, right? I've had them. So, okay. What's your question?
So real quick, because you have, you did allude to this, but in the back of the book, you both wrote a section on 11 quick tips for a great relationship. And it's cool because then you got to write yours, John got to write his. 2 of the ones that you wrote that stood out to me because I feel like I can relate to this, especially since Shay and I are both a lot like you and John. We're both ambitious. We both have our own companies. We both have the things we're doing in the world. I didn't marry a woman that just wants to stay home and do nothing. And she didn't marry a dad that just wants to like work a job and then disappear. Like we both feel like we're meant to create things and put them out there in the world. And that's beautiful. And people say, wow, that's so cute. Except for then you live with it and you realize we run into these 2 things you say don't to do, which are don't compete and don't keep score.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that real briefly. What does that look like and how can we take that advice to heart?
I think, I like to think of it almost like strengthening a muscle.
Okay.
Like the minute something comes in where it's you want to lash out or you want to go like, hey, it's just turning it around and actually complimenting. So one of the things that I had to start doing. So there was a point where we were competing. And it was in different ways, but again, we were competing. And I'll never forget. John walked in the door. He looked so handsome, and he was, flying off to another speaking engagement where everybody just was, they think he's so great. And I'm standing there trying to, fight for what I need to do, but I still have to get the kids ready, blah, 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 blah. And I wanted to cut him down. I wanted to be like, I wanted to say something that made him not feel good about himself. And I just, all of a sudden it hit me. I'm like, And I'm telling you, it was like I did the complete opposite of what I really wanted to do. And I looked at him and I go, you look so handsome right now. You better watch yourself because those ladies, they're going to be running after you. And Graham, he got the biggest smile on his face. Like, and then he just kissed me and he like ran out the door. And something happened in that I realized it actually made me feel good too.
Wow.
So that jealousy actually flipped. And then I did it again. So when the jealousy would come up, I would actually flip it and actually be encouraging. I would do the opposite. I know that sounds crazy, but the more I did it, the easier it got. And the more I did it, the more I got it back. And again, this is where you can't do the whole, well, I'm doing it and he's not, or I'm doing it, because it'll work out. So I just say that for me, that is how I saw huge transformation in our relationship. So let the best thing that your partner hears about themselves come from you.
Oh, mic drop.
Yep.
That's the line right there that everyone needed to hear. That is so good. Yeah. Let the best thing that your partner hears come from you.
Yep.
Yeah. That is so, because what that is, Kathryn, is that is the principle of generosity just in words and in relationships. It's the same thing with money. Like give the thing that you want to hold on to or you want more of for yourself. I'm afraid to give money because I won't have enough. I'm afraid to give a compliment because then it'll be taken and I will be left without that build up myself. But you just described the power of generosity. When you give, it multiplies and it comes back to you. You reap what you sow.
It really does. The more you do it, it just gets easier. And the more you do it, it's been a beautiful thing to see. Yeah.
That's so cool. Thank you. That was beautiful. That was so beautiful. Well, let's wrap this up here because I know we're pressed for time and you've got other important things to do. But we have a segment on the show that we can go any direction you want to go with this. Okay. It's called the Golden Rule segment, and it's a hypothetical question. You've got two wonderful kids. They're grown now. They're doing incredible things in the world. If your kids, though, forgot everything that you and John taught them, everything you taught them, except for one piece of advice or wisdom that you did teach them, that they actually would carry with them for the rest of their lives, somewhat like a golden rule, what would you and John want that to be?
Nurture the root. I would just say get right back to basics. Nurture the root. That's the foundation. Avoid all the distractions. Avoid all the glitter and the, get back to what really matters. And for us as a family, that's our relationship with God.
That's so beautiful. I love it. If you nurture the root, you will get really good fruit. Yep. Most people look at the fruit, swap it out, but they're missing the most important thing, the thing that will bring the fruit. Yeah, I love that. Kathryn, I love what you and John are doing in the world. I love the book, Relationship Grit. I'm excited for the next one. It sounds like you're writing. Is that like something we can tee up?
So I have the outline. Okay. And it is on intimacy. It's going to be a really cool book. It's going to be really cool. It's not, there's nothing, it's, I think it'll be revolutionizing. So, and it's not like a how-to book. It's about true intimacy, which is really about oneness, right? Yeah. God. So, yeah.
Oh, I can't wait for that because that's going to be so needed. I'm so excited about that. Everyone check out the Relationship Grit anywhere books are sold. You can go to kathrynforreal.com, Kathryn with a Y, kathrynforreal.com. She's got a bunch of incredible free guides there.
So many free things. Yeah.
And check out her podcast as well. Kathryn, is it the Kathryn for Real podcast?
Yeah, Kathryn for Real.
Amazing. Thank you so much for
Graham on too. So
yes, well then you get a double dose. Yeah, we'll get a double dose. So I'm excited. Thanks for just blessing my audience today and talking about something that I think is so important, which is marriage and relationships.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on, Graham.
Yep. We'll see you soon.